So we're talking about exponential functions, and this leads into some finance. And so I'm going to give you a couple definitions, formulas first that you'll need to know. So suppose P, and all these letters are going to be used in my formulas down here, so I want to get them out of the way so you understand what they are. Suppose P dollars in principal is invested or borrowed. So P, I'm telling the bank, I'm giving you P amount of money, so it could be $10,000, and I want you to invest it at an annual rate, so whatever percent, 3% or 2%, and I want you to give me that percent for that many years, T years. So P is the amount that you either give the bank or the bank gives to you. R is the annual rate that you owe or that you're getting back, and T is the amount of years that you're going to pay on the loan, or that they're going to give you, how many years they're going to give you the interest on. All right, so there's the first one is called simple interest. All right, and simple interest is labeled as capital I, and that is P times R times T. And honestly, this one is, you won't see this one on the test. I want to get it out there, and just so you've seen it before, it might be on the homework. Just do your best at it. It's literally multiplying three numbers together. So I think you're okay on that one, even if you do see an example on the homework. The next two are the important ones. This one is called compounding. Compounding n times, and I'll get to what n is here in a second. It's just another thing we need to plug in. So it's labeled as A, and so A here is our accumulated value. So A is equal to our principal P, and you might just want to watch me before you write this down, because it's not complicated, it's just weird. So just watch me before you write it. So we're opening a parenthesis, then we have 1 plus R, our rate, divided by N raised to the N times T power. That is our compounding formula. So what does this look like? Does it look familiar to anything that I've shown you recently, in particular from the last video lecture? It looks similar to the E function, the 1 plus 1 over x raised to the x power. So the reason we think E came about is a finance person said, well, what if I make a rate of 1, which is 100%? And so out came E, and it's been used and useful ever since. So things to know here: A is our accumulated value. This is what we'll be searching for in a lot of the problems, and we'll be searching for a value up here in the exponent, which that's later sections. N, we need to know what that is the number of compounding periods per year. Number of compounding periods per year. And then the rate, we already know what all those are. And then the last one we need to know is continuous compounding. It's similar. It starts out as A, and A represents the same thing here. And it starts out with P, our principal. That's important. We always need to know what that initial value is. And then that's multiplied by E, the new constant that we learned. So P times E, and E is raised to the R times T power. All right, we're going to look at an example here of how to calculate these. Example 1. suppose you invest $5,000 and let's say $5,000 for 10 years. And it pays 6.5%. Find the following. All right, so that's our setup. So you are investing $5,000 for 10 years, and you're going to get 6.5%, which is pretty good. And I'm going to give you a couple of A, B, C, and D, and maybe an E here. So the first one, let's look at compounded annually. And that's something for these problems that we need to know. You need to know how many times you're compounding per year. So here, if you're compounding annually, how many times? What does annually mean? It means one time a year. All right. If you're compounding quarterly means there's 4. All right. If you're compounding monthly, how many months are there in a year? 12. All right. So that's how you figure out how many times you're compounding. Now we need to figure out which formula we're using. So the way to figure that out is pretty easy. You always use this formula here if you're compounding n times. But if the problem says you're compounding continuously, then you use this one. Simple. If it says continuously compounding, it's this problem. Otherwise, you use this one. All right? So let's start out by writing our formula. We know that we are compounding annually, so that means we are using A equals P 1 plus R over N raised to the N times T power. So now we need to label and plug in everything we know. So I'm just going to go ahead and label over here. P is 5,000. We know R is our rate, which is 6.5%. When we write R, we don't say 6.5%. When we plug it in, we need to write it as a decimal. So we need to get rid of this percent sign out here. So the way you do that is you move the decimal spot over 2 spots. So now the decimal's here and you add in zeros. So you get 0.065. Right? It was 6.5%. The decimal was here, but you move over twice. 1, 2. And then you fill in the zeros as needed, and the percent sign drops off. Then N, well, N is different per, let's come back to N. Let's do T. T is 10. And then, so here in part A, we still need to know what N is. When we're compounding annually, that means once, so N will equal 1. So for parts A, B, C, and D, we're going to use these same variables here, but N is going to change. So let's plug in now. P is 5,000. 1 plus R we said was 0.065. Sorry, made that too little. And then N is 1 raised to the N times T power. N is 1 and T is 10. So this is equal to 5,000 1 plus 0.065 to the 10th power. All right, and so you really need to get good at, so this is the easy part, is just figuring out everything and plugging it in. But you need to be able to plug this in your calculator and get the correct answer, which is actually more difficult than you think if you're not very calculator savvy. So the way you do this, and this one's easy, you would start by doing 0.065 divided by whatever's down here, which is 1 in this case. So that gives you 0.065. 0.065. And then multiply everything up here, and that gives you that. Now what you want to do is add what's inside the parentheses together. So you can do this as I'm talking. It might be easier. Watch it once and then do it as I'm talking. But add what's in the parentheses first, so you get 1.065, and then raise that to the 10th power, and that gives you a number. Take that number and multiply it by 5,000. And then what you get is 9,385.69. All right, let's try another. And let's try part B, compounded monthly. All right, you try this one by yourself. Pause the video now. So here for compounding monthly, that means that N will be 12. So let's start by writing our formula. All right, now plug in everything. So that's equal to 5,000, 1 plus, and R is still the same thing, 0.065 divided by N, which we just said was 12, raised to the N times T power, so 12 times 10. All right, so again, you need to get better at the calculator with this, so a lot of practice. So to do this in the calculator, first thing you need to do is take this 0.065 and divide it by 12. That gets you a number. Then you take that number and you add 1 to it. So then now you have a number inside of here. Now this number inside of here, you need to raise it to this power, which is 120. And then you need to take that number and multiply it by 5,000. And this gets you 9,56092. All right, and so we're going to try another. Compounded, let's say daily. Compounded daily. So let's write our formula. And N here is 365. So plugging in, you get 5,000, 1 plus R, which is 0.65, divided by N, which is 365, raised to the N times T power, which is 365 times 10. All right, so it's the same thing over and over, but good practice plugging in, and it's good practice plugging in the calculator. So you start by doing 0.065 divided by 365. That gets you a number, and add that number to 1. And then you take this number and you raise it to this power, 365 times 10, which is 3,650. Then that gives you a number for this portion, and multiply that number by 5,000. And that gets you 9577.15. All right, last one. And I could have done quarterly in here, I just skipped over it, but quarterly would mean N is 4. All right. And the last one I want to do is compounded continuously. All right. Start by writing the formula, which is A equals the PERT. That's how I remember it, PERT. P times E, and E is raised to the R times T power. And we know all this information already. P is 5,000 times E, and E is raised to the R times T power. R is 0.65 times T, which is 10. So the way you do this is you start with the exponent up here, multiply 0.065 times 10. That gets you a number. then do e raised to that number, and that gets you a number, and multiply that number by 5,000. And what that gets you is 9,577.70. All right, what do you notice about our accumulated value as the number of times we compound increases? A increases also. So up here, n was 1, and here's how much we made. Over here, n is 12, and it increased. N is 365, it increased. And now we're compounding continuously, which is the most. All right? That's it for this section.